Okay, so get ready for this. We're diving into the Old Testament, but through, a bit of an unusual lens. We're talking hypnotic regression.
Hypnotic regression.
Yeah, we've got transcripts from 4 different sessions,
Really?
and they get a little wild.
It's fascinating stuff. Now, of course, we can't treat hypnotic regression, like a historical record or anything.
Right.
But the common threads that emerge from these individuals who are, totally unrelated,
Yeah.
offer a really compelling perspective on the Old
Yeah,
Testament.
that's what we're here for, right?
Yeah.
A new perspective. And just to be clear, we're not trying to prove or disprove anyone's religious beliefs or anything like that.
Right.
This is more about exploring alternative interpretations, like a thought experiment.
Exactly.
Like what if? What if there's more to the story? What if there's a connection to Nostradamus? Or, what if the Old Testament was used as a tool for control?
I mean, those are some of the big themes we see popping up.
Right. And then there's these powerful crystals that people talk about.
Oh, yeah.
Influencing different parts of the world. Like, it's a lot.
And we can't forget the Nephilim.
The Nephilim. Oh, don't even get me started on the Nephilim. These part-human hybrids.
Right out of biblical texts.
Okay, so where do we even begin? We've got 4 different accounts of the Old Testament's origins, each one with its own, twists and turns.
That's a lot to unpack.
So let's just start with the authorship.
Yeah.
Who actually wrote this thing?
Always a good place to start.
Right.
Yeah. One of the most interesting things is just how different the accounts are when it comes to, the question of authorship.
Yeah.
Who actually put pen to paper, so to speak.
Like we have Dora, for instance, who describes Moses receiving information, but it's not from, another person.
Yeah.
It's through this beam of light.
Almost like a download.
Yeah, like a cosmic download from some higher intelligence.
Right.
It's pretty different from the, traditional view of Moses as the sole author of the Torah.
Yeah. It really challenges our assumptions about how these texts came to be.
Yeah. And then we have Tamara. She places the authorship way later, like in the 18th century, with Nostradamus playing a key role.
Now that's a curveball.
Nostradamus. Yeah, it's a huge curveball. What does a 16th century, astrologer have to do with the Old Testament?
It's a great question.
It makes no sense.
Well, according to Tamara, Nostradamus was part of this group that basically compiled and shaped the Old Testament.
Through their own purposes.
Right. But she doesn't really go into detail about what those purposes might have been.
It's like a conspiracy theory.
Yeah, it has that element, for sure.
It's a conspiracy theory within a historical mystery.
It really does make you think. And what's interesting is that this idea that the Old Testament maybe was used as a tool for manipulation.
Oh, yeah.
Comes up in some of the other accounts as well.
Right, like with Evgenia.
Evgenia, exactly. She describes the Old Testament as being intentionally divided into these sections.
Right.
And the later sections, she says, focus more on control and fear than the earlier ones.
Like, almost like a bait and switch.
It almost seems like whoever put it together had a hidden agenda, you know? A desire to kind of nudge humanity in a particular direction.
Steer us.
Yeah, steer us towards a certain path.
Yeah.
And Natalia touches on this idea, too.
Oh, yeah.
This hidden agenda, the deliberate manipulation.
She sees the Old Testament as a collection of stories, but
they've been distorted.
Distorted, yeah.
Boosted.
To serve those in power. So it's like we're seeing a pattern here. Right.
It just does seem that way.
Regardless of who wrote it or when they wrote it.
Right.
There's this recurring theme of manipulation and control.
Yes. And it makes you wonder about what truths might be hidden beneath those narratives,
It's almost scary to think about it,
It can be a bit unsettling.
That maybe, just maybe, everything we thought we knew about this book is wrong, or at least incomplete.
If the Old Testament was intentionally manipulated like these accounts suggest, what does that say about, the power of stories and belief systems?
That's a lot.
And how they shape our world,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But what's even more intriguing, I think, is how these subjects describe God.
Oh, yeah.
Forget that traditional image, the benevolent, all-powerful being.
Right.
Their accounts are anything but conventional.
They really challenge the traditional image, don't they?
So Dora, for example, she describes this duality within God.
Yeah.
Like a struggle between the physical and the ethereal.
Interesting.
Yeah, she sees Elohim as this, battleground of these opposing forces that are constantly, vying for dominance.
So not the singular, all-knowing God that many people believe in.
It's more like a cosmic tug of war.
That's a great way to put it.
This constant push and pull between different aspects of the divine.
Right. And then it gets even weirder.
Yeah.
When she describes Yahweh,
Yes.
she sees it as the opposite of God.
Like a force that leads to fragmentation and self-destruction.
Wait, so Yahweh, as in
Yeah.
the name for God in the Old Testament,
That Yahweh
is the opposite of God. That's a pretty radical idea.
It is, but that's what she's saying. Like, it represents this anti-God.
This force that opposes unity,
Like, actively opposes it.
harmony. Okay, so we've got this duality within God,
Yes.
with Elohim as the battleground,
the battleground.
and Yahweh as this opposing force.
This is like a cosmic drama unfolding.
It's a lot to take in.
A battle for the soul of creation.
And what do the other subjects say?
Well, Tamara, for example,
Okay.
describes Yahweh in a much more concrete way.
Okay.
She sees him as a physical being,
A physical being.
like a large gray humanoid
Okay.
with 6 fingers,
Wait, 6 fingers.
a tail,
Yeah.
heavy legs.
Wow.
He sits on a throne and seems to be very much in control, but not necessarily in a, benevolent way.
Not the image that comes to mind when you think God.
Not at all.
Mm-hmm.
And she describes Elohim as a force that manipulates and controls, using religion to essentially drain energy from humans.
Wow, so Elohim is like a parasitic entity.
Yeah, like feeding on our faith and devotion.
That's a pretty dark image.
Very dark. Then you have Agenia. She sees Elohim as a completely different thing.
Okay.
She sees it as this group of Jesus-like figures
Oh, wow.
standing behind a portal,
Interesting.
offering a choice between following a single entity
Okay.
or a multitude.
So a brigade of Jesus-like figures.
Right. It's like each subject is tuned into a different frequency.
Like a cosmic radio.
Yeah, picking up a different signal.
That's a great analogy.
And then their descriptions of the Nephilim.
Oh, the Nephilim.
Some see them as these telepathic giants.
Right.
Others as small, fear-feeding creatures,
Like what?
like evil elves.
Oh, wow.
It's wild, right?
Like the Nephilim are a mirror.
Reflecting our own fears and fascinations.
That's a good point.
So who are they? Fallen angels. Extraterrestrials.
Yeah.
Something else entirely. I need answers.
That's the big question, and one we're going to dive into.
Okay.
But first, let's talk about the Great Flood.
Ooh, yes.
Because these accounts offer some pretty interesting perspectives on what really went down.
I am ready
Get ready.
to hear them.
Yeah.
All right, so the Great Flood. One of the most iconic stories, right,
Absolutely.
in the Old Testament. But these hypnotic regression sessions, they give us some, well, pretty unconventional views on what actually happened, like what really went down.
You know, forget that image of a vengeful God punishing humanity
Right.
with the flood.
Yeah.
These accounts paint a much more nuanced picture.
Okay.
Like Tamara, for example.
Yeah.
She suggests that the flood wasn't just some random natural disaster. It was deliberate,
What?
orchestrated by those in power
Oh, wow.
to eliminate basically anyone who didn't conform
To their, agenda.
to their new religious order.
That's kind of dark.
It is a pretty chilling thought, isn't it?
Very chilling.
And it really raises questions about, how religion and other belief systems have been used throughout history to control people.
To manipulate them.
To manipulate them, exactly.
Wow.
Now, Evgenia, on the other hand,
Okay.
she sees the flood more as a symbolic thing,
Okay.
representing the cyclical nature of creation
Oh, interesting.
and destruction. You can't have one without the other.
Duality.
Duality, exactly.
Well, not necessarily a literal event then.
Right, more like a metaphor
Okay.
for the ebb and flow of life,
I like that. The constant interplay
Yeah.
between those opposing forces.
And it ties in nicely with what we were talking about earlier,
Yeah.
with the duality within God.
Makes sense. What about Natalia?
Natalia takes a more, metaphysical approach.
Okay.
She describes the flood as a sort of reset button
Okay.
for the planet, like a necessary transition
A transition,
that brought about a new era.
like a cosmic reset.
Yeah. Like the earth was being cleansed,
Wow.
prepared for a fresh start.
And that ties into
It does.
the crystals, right?
Yeah. The powerful crystals influencing specific territories.
Wait, hold on. Crystals?
Crystals.
Like the sparkly rocks people use for healing and stuff.
Those are the ones.
What do those have to do with the Old Testament?
Well, according to Natalia, there are these powerful crystals embedded within the earth. They act as energy conduits,
Energy content.
influencing human consciousness, shaping events.
So they're like controlling us.
In a way, yeah. She specifically mentions one located in Palestine,
Okay.
which she believes is connected to the conflicts there.
So you're saying a crystal is responsible for, like,
It's what she's saying.
turmoil in the Middle East?
That's her interpretation.
I mean, that's a lot.
It is a lot to process. But it's interesting that Svetlana,
Another subject.
right, another subject, also describes a powerful crystal in Palestine.
Really?
She calls it the key to the planet. And she sees it as a source of both healing and destruction.
So it can go either way.
It can go either way. Its energy is amplified.
By what?
By the intentions of those who interact with it.
Oh, so it's like a mirror.
It's almost like a mirror reflecting our intentions back to us.
Wow, okay. So two separate accounts of this crystal in Palestine, both suggesting it can either, like, amplify peace or conflict.
Depending on how people approach it.
Fascinating.
And, you know, this idea that crystals can store energy, both positive and negative, it's not a new concept. It resonates with a lot of spiritual traditions.
Makes you think.
It does.
Maybe there's more to these beliefs than we give them credit for.
It's possible.
Okay, but what about these Nephilim? We keep talking about them.
Right.
But I still don't really get who or what they are.
Yeah, let's unpack that.
Okay.
Remember, in biblical texts, they're often depicted as giants.
The giants.
Right. But these hypnotic subjects, they offer a much more complex view.
Okay, I'm all ears.
So Dora describes them as creations of the system.
Creations of the system. What does that even mean?
She doesn't really elaborate, but she says they exist on a low vibrational plane.
Vibrational plane.
Think of it like a level of consciousness.
Oh, okay.
So she's saying these Nephilim exist on a lower level, dominated by fear and negativity.
Okay.
They seem to represent a kind of parasitic consciousness.
So they're like feeding off of us?
That's one way to look at it, hindering our spiritual growth.
Right.
Perpetuating that cycle of duality.
We talked about that.
That we've been discussing.
So not just giants.
Right.
But like energy vampires.
That's one interpretation.
Wow.
But then we have Tamara, who links the Nephilim to the Anunnaki.
The Anunnaki, those are
ancient Mesopotamian deities,
right?
Often associated with advanced technology, maybe even extraterrestrial origins.
Wait, so are we saying these Nephilim are like aliens?
Well, Tamara seems to think so. She describes them as large, beautiful beings with advanced DNA. 34 strands compared to our 22?
What, 34? We only have 22.
That's what she says.
That's crazy. And what are they doing?
They act as guardians, protecting Earth and other realms.
For what?
From negative extraterrestrial influences.
Oh, so they're like the good guys.
In her interpretation, yes.
So we went from energy vampires to benevolent alien protectors.
It's a pretty wide range of interpretations.
Like everyone sees something different.
Exactly. It makes you wonder if the Nephilim represent maybe a multitude of beings. Or forces that have interacted with humanity throughout history.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought.
Yeah, rather than a single entity.
And what about Evgenia? What did she say?
Evgenia's take is even more intriguing. She describes them as small, fear-feeding creatures. Like evil elves.
Evil elves. Now that is creepy.
It's a very different image.
Very different. It's almost like she's tapping into something primal, like this deep-seated fear that we all have.
It's fascinating how all these accounts, while they're so diverse, they all seem to point to the Nephilim as beings that feed on negativity.
Oh, that's interesting.
Whether they're giant guardians, energy vampires, or mischievous elves, they all seem to represent this force.
This negative force.
That thrives on our fears.
Like they need our fear to survive.
In a way, yeah.
That's a thought.
It is.
So it's amazing to me how these sessions
they're pretty remarkable.
Offer such diverse and thought-provoking perspectives on these ancient stories.
It's like we're peeling back the layers of history and uncovering these hidden meanings
that we might never have considered on our own. It's incredible to me, like all these ancient stories, right? Passed down for centuries, they could have all these hidden meanings.
That's what's so fascinating about these accounts.
Yeah.
Challenge us to,
to think differently.
To question what we thought we knew. And what I find really interesting is that despite all the differences in their interpretations, there are these recurring themes like manipulation, duality, the influence of these powerful forces.
Yeah, we don't really understand.
That we don't fully grasp.
Right. And it makes you wonder, like,
what are they tapping into?
Yeah, are they tapping into something like deeper? like a collective unconscious.
Yeah, it's a fascinating possibility.
Where these like archetypal stories and figures, they all just like reside.
It's like the shared reservoir of human experience.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting too because these themes,
they resonate with us.
They do. They resonate with us on a personal level too.
I mean, we all experience duality in our lives, right?
Absolutely. Good and evil, light and darkness.
The struggle is real.
Yeah, and we've all felt that influence of forces beyond our control.
Societal pressures, historical events, even our own subconscious desires. It's a lot to contend with.
But it's like these ancient stories, they're like a mirror.
Right, reflecting our own inner struggles.
Yeah, and the complexities of, what it means to be human.
And by exploring these alternative interpretations, we gain a deeper understanding not only of the whole Testament, but also of ourselves.
Okay, so I gotta ask, what does this all mean for us?
Us.
Yeah, for us, the listeners. Are you saying we should just, like, throw out the traditional interpretations?
Yeah.
And just go with these, like, subconscious narratives?
No, not at all.
Okay.
The point isn't to replace one set of beliefs with another.
Okay, yeah,
but to expand our understanding.
Yeah.
To consider the possibility.
That there might be more.
That there might be multiple layers of meaning.
In these texts.
Embedded within these ancient texts.
So it's like we're being given a new lens.
That's a great way to put it.
To view the Old Testament through.
A lens that reveals hidden depths and complexities.
That we might not have seen before.
Right. And that's what makes this deep dive so exciting.
It is exciting.
It's not about finding all the answers. It's about embracing the mystery.
Yeah.
And continuing to explore these stories and what they mean for us today.
It's about the journey.
It is about the journey.
Not the destination.
Exactly. And sometimes those unexpected paths, they lead to the most profound discoveries.
So true. And what I find so fascinating is that these hypnotic regression accounts,
they're fascinating, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. While they might seem, outlandish.
A little out there.
They echo these similar themes.
That we find in history.
Yeah.
Mythology, even modern conspiracy theories.
It's like we're all searching for those answers.
It speaks to this deep human need.
Yeah.
To understand the unknown.
To find meaning in the chaos.
And to look for those connections.
To believe in something bigger than ourselves.
And that's where discernment is so important.
Right. We have to be open-minded, but
we also need to think critically.
About the information we come across.
And not just blindly accept everything we hear.
So how do we do that? How do we find that balance?
Between open-mindedness and critical thinking. I think it starts with curiosity.
Okay.
Asking questions, challenging our own assumptions.
Not being afraid to, dig deeper.
Exactly. And recognizing that knowledge is always evolving.
That we're all works in progress.
There's always more to learn.
Always more to learn. And maybe sometimes we have to be willing to be a little uncomfortable.
To step outside our comfort zones.
To get to those, really juicy insights.
Right. To embrace those uncomfortable truths.
Yeah. So as we wrap up this deep dive
into the Old Testament
through the lens of hypnotic regression, what's the final takeaway? What do you want our listeners to remember?
I hope this deep dive has sparked a sense of curiosity
Yeah.
and wonder about the Old Testament. I encourage everyone to, go back to those texts.
Read them again.
Read them again with fresh eyes. Question those traditional narratives.
Question everything.
Embrace the possibility that there might be more to the story.
That there's always more to the story.
Than you initially thought.
It's a call to explore.
To question.
To discover those hidden meanings.
In these timeless stories.
And maybe, just maybe, we'll discover something new about ourselves along the way.
It's all connected.
It is. This has been The Deep Dive. Until next time, keep those minds curious and those perspectives open.